Some people in this world are on the front lines of the struggle between good and evil, and some, like us, bear witness. I'm Therese Apel.
And I'm Nicole Pratt. You may have heard us as we worked on stories and series about law enforcement and crime. And it's safe to say we've seen some of the best and worst of human nature.
We decided there's no greater honor than bringing you the stories of the men and women who seek out the monsters, who speak for the victims, and who put the pieces together on some of the biggest Mississippi crime stories of our time.
Welcome to Investigation Homicide.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Investigation Homicide. I am Therese Apel, and we are glad to have you here today. Remember, as we go along today, if you want to comment, if you want to send a question, whatever like that, you are more than welcome to. And I think when you find out more about our guest, you will be excited about doing that. We have Amanda Johansson with us today, my co-host.
Hi, everyone.
How's your day been?
Let's not go there. It's been a long day. Been a long week.
She's still in her work clothes. If you can see her, she's still wearing her Clinton Police Department shirt. So
Yeah.
clearly it's been one of those days you hadn't had a chance to slow down. So,
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the job, I guess.
It is, unfortunately.
Awesome. Well, so on that note, speaking of hectic jobs, we're going to go ahead and introduce you to our guest. His name is Bo Bertling, and he is a pretty much, I think, lifetime licensed professional counselor for the Texas Department of Corrections. So he has seen all kinds of things, primarily the inside workings of the minds of some really shady criminal type characters. Bo, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So first off, let's just talk about you. So what is it that, first off, start off, where did you decide that this is what you wanted to do? And then talk us through your career. How'd you get there?
Let's see. I was in college, and they had an opportunity to work as a guard for the summer months. And my father actually hooked me up with the guy that could get me there. And so for 2 summers, I worked at the Cofield unit as a guard. And that was back in 74, 75. So it was back in the old school days. Went ahead and did that. They gave me enough money to pay for my tuition and books for the next couple of semesters, and got me through school as I was paying my way through. Anyway, I did other things, ran rehab workshop, ran restaurants, ran restaurants in Huntsville with my father and family and brother. And I just wanted something different, so I went back to, I'd already got my bachelor's and went back and got my master's at Sam Houston State University, and in counselor education. Got my licensed professional counselor license done, and in the meantime, I had worked as a counsel substitute while I was going to get through my master's. I was working as a classification counselor, and then as a psychometrist doing IQ testing for a couple of years. Then I worked with the sex offender treatment program evaluation for a few years. I opened up Holiday Unit as the first psychologist or head mental health professional on that unit when it first opened, ran that 5 years. Then did some other things, then took over Polinsky, Diboll, Duncan Gibb Lewis, head psych for a while, took over, brought me back into town, took over Ellis and Ferguson for a while, took over Ellis and Eastham for a while, and finally just ended up at Ellis for the last 6 or 8, 10 years until I retired. And when I retired, I came back as a basically mental health evaluation specialist for the administrative segregation group in TDC. Basically, I eyeballed every ad seg offender in the state of Texas twice a year to look for mental health issues. And that's everywhere from El Paso to Beeville to Amarillo, Wichita Falls, just all over the state. Saw of course, at Polinsky, we had death row there, so I'd already used to working with death row inmates there. But with this job, I also covered the women's prisons and did the segs there as well. So anyway, did that for 9 years and finally retired. And now nothing but sitting home,
Sure.
taking care of my grandkids.
Well, you seem incredibly normal considering all the twisted minds that you've probably been exposed to. It's like I said to you earlier, I went to therapy this morning and was talking to my therapist and thought, gosh, 8 hours of talking to people about their problems. I don't know how he does it, but yours is a whole different level from that. So, talk to us for a second just about like when did you realize that this is what you wanted to do as far as like, what made the decision for you? I want to work with inmates. I want to work with criminals.
Well, as a guard perspective, you can you basically just order inmates and you keep things and try to keep them killing each other and doing the right things. And uh, always felt there was a lot of people in there that could use help, uh, needed guidance, uh, needed direction in their lives and things like that. And so that's the way I approach my job. Yeah, not all were receptive by any stretch of the imagination. I'd always call that my being on flat rock therapy. You could talk to them and give them the best advice, and come back next day and you couldn't even tell you've been there. Uh, your thoughts and inferences have all dried up. So uh, it's a little frustrating in that respect. But I saw a lot of people that needed help. I think I've helped a lot of people, and I think it's a positive thing. I know I've made differences in people's lives. Um, that was an incentive for me. Like I said, this large majority of them probably not, but when you run the psych department, you have to keep in mind what you're there for, keep them from being ill as much as possible. We monitor their drugs and that they're getting. That's the problem with psych. Is psych always had the best drugs. Several of them would use them to sniff or snort or abuse, of course. There are a lot of people that claim to have mental health issues that really just had attitude issues. Um, I was not a proponent of continuing bad behaviors or bad drugs in people that didn't need them. So I convinced a lot of people that they were not mentally ill, but they need to change things in their lives. Um, but we did have truly mentally ill people there. There's no doubt about that. I've met God, Jesus, and most disciples
Yeah.
in one respect or not of another. Satanist or whatever you want to talk about, serial killers and good and bad, both men and women. So uh, it's been
What's that like to see them as humans? Because I mean, and I realize that that question sounds very one-dimensional, but to most people who learn about these things through podcasts or crime shows or books or whatever, they're only learning the side of the person that was the killer or that was the child molester or whatever like that. What was it like to you to see them also as like, well, this was a broken little boy who grew up into a teenager who had anger issues, who then, went on to become this notorious killer. Um, is what's that view like?
it's it's difficult being not trying to be not non-judgmental
Yeah.
when you're doing therapy. Um, every therapist has to face that in one sense or another uh, of how they approach their clients. Um, I you learn not to waste your time on those that don't want it. Uh, I used to run groups that I basically use rational motive therapy. This is the way things are. This is your emotion involved in this, and this is how things go if you continue to do this. The again definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Um, Trying to point out to them that they could. A lot of them come from drug infested households their whole lives. They've many of them never held jobs before in their lives, more than maybe 6 months at McDonald's. you know, uh, it's my world was different from that, and I tried to open up my world to show them what can be done. I mean, one of the examples I used was there were at least two people in my neighborhood where we moved from, and they ran lawn services. These were homes 100 grand up in those days. Now they're a lot more than that, but they did very well mowing lawns. Go get you a lawnmower when you get out. Get you a weed eater. Go knock on doors. Get you some cards printed up. It's either that choice or continue to do what you're doing here. There's other things they can do. Uh, Clean chimneys. There's a lot of those simple tasks and jobs you can do to make a living out there without having to bring the drugs into it and everything else. But the drugs were main because you take them and put them 4 years in prison and you stick them back out in the same place they were in,
Mhm.
and they just fall right back in the same hole. And that's sad to see. But there were some that made it out and made differences.
So I'm curious to know, how does your approach differ from someone who is incarcerated versus someone who is a civilian just out in the world? Because it's got to be different, right?
Yeah, but it is because the incarceration factor involved in it. You don't have the freedom to do things you would have to do today when you leave the set here. You can go do other things. Um, the but they had the same issues. They lose their mothers, they lose their grandmothers, they lose their children through gang violence while they're in prison. They have those grief issues that are involved in those things. I've had the biggest and the baddest cry like babies because they're lost. Um, there are some that don't feel like we feel, that have the emotional skills that we have, that don't have the humanity, I guess you'd say. Uh, and again, that's you got to know where you can spend time and make it valuable, and where you're just wasting your time. Um, and there were plenty of people for me to see, so I didn't really want to waste my time.
So when you talk about that humanity factor, one of the things that, of course, fascinated me years ago, I'm just like every other college girl. I went through that phase where I'm going to be a criminal profiler. And then I found out how much school it takes to do that. So I was like, maybe not. But one of the things that I've heard about as I've talked to detectives through my life and to people like yourself is that with some, I mean, you are looking evil in the face. And with some, it's just a broken person who made a mistake. To you, how did you determine that whenever you started talking to somebody new?
I, I didn't really look at their crime.
Mhm.
That's not something. When I knew a guy was coming in to see me the first time, I would look at their medical records. I would look at their history. That it came with the charts they get brought with them, or later on the computers, to find out, what mental illness problems they were having. I didn't spend the time to. I didn't want to invest the time in looking up their case histories as far as the crimes and things like that. So I didn't go in with prejudgmental attitudes. But when you run across somebody that just doesn't have that humanity, I'll say you can sort of feel it.
Yeah.
There's a difference. I've seen some that I thought there was just the lights on, but nobody's home. Uh, there's just no humanity in that person. Of course, that's not my mind to judge. But if when you're working in therapy and somebody rejects everything you do, the attempts you make, then you learn not to waste your time. And I would offer other programs uh, that if they want to get in a group, and I try to put them into a group where they'd be around other people that were actually wanting to change, wanting to create different lives for themselves, and hopefully that some of those may pick up on just because the association to see that other people can actually do this that are in race as well. But it's just, I it's difficult not to be judgmental, but you can. and you have to just learn where I'm not going to waste my time.
Sure. Well, and talk about, if you don't mind, what about you changed from the time that you started doing this to the time that you retired? Like, did you find that interacting with these folks kind of changed you or hardened you or even softened you during those years?
Change me? I don't know. I don't know that it changed. I look at people at Walmart a lot stranger.
I bet.
uh, I've got 4 wonderful kids. I've got a whole bunch of grandkids and one great grandkid, and that's. I guess I'm more concerned, same as a police officer would be, that goes out every day and sees what they see. I'm aware of what people can do, uh, and that frightens me not so much for myself, but for others. Um, I was there also to work with the guards to try to alleviate some of their problems. Um, you have suicides, you have attempted suicides, you have, uh, the last 9 years when I was making the runs, doing all the SEG units, I would go up the stairs. Some stairs are 7 flights up, in some of the Texas prisons, and you walk cell to cell and look at each person. Uh, I'm not judging. I'm looking for mental health issues. Um, but I'm open and receptive to any problems they bring to me. Some of them I got along with fine. Some of them didn't want to discuss anything. I've been called about everything you can think of, one way or another, and threatened sometimes. But again, you're I guess become hyper aware of your surroundings. Um, Realize that these are not nice people, and uh, you put yourself at risk. But I never really felt. I guess the worst ever feared. We got a guy in a holiday unit. And we were taking like 300 people a day, and basically the buses from the counties would bring them in, and uh, they'd take them back to the clip and dip area. They would shave their head, give them showers, put them in TDC clothes. And that's basically all I knew about them from what I saw in whatever bag of drugs they brought in with them. And had a big guy, he's about 6'7", 6'8", big white guy. And I said, "Why are you taking all these drugs?" He said, "Well, I'm God." I said,
Oh,
"God, really?" I said, "Okay, are you the Father, the Son?" He said, "I'm God." I said, "Okay." I didn't want to discuss theology. So I brought him off into a little room to the side and started talking to him. And he was from Corpus Christi, and he had this and that, had 8th grade education, and all this was going great. Well, a couple of guards were messing around, and one of them threw a shoe at the other one, and the intake facilities, the walls are metal, and that shoe hit the metal wall right where God and I were sitting. He and I both stood up. I thought to myself, I'm going to die. you know, this is a big guy. And so, being a good therapist and kept my head, I sat back down. I looked up at him. And I said, "That scared the heck out of me, didn't you?" He goes, "Uh huh." And so we got along fine after that. And I went and
even
had a
Doug
talk with
gets
him.
scared.
I had a talk with him. Well, medications keep people down to a certain level. And when something abnormal happens, medications don't work anymore. And that was kind of fearful. I was involved in several uses of force, usually because guards were getting hurt, and I would jump in. Um, I do real well until they put the gas in there, and I'm worthless.
Sure.
you know, but I've been out, and you work as a team with the guards, with the nurses, because I was always in the infirmary. So the doctors and nurses and the psychiatrist I work with, and they're all good people. I still got a lot of them as my friends uh, that I've worked with over the years. I can honestly say I do not have any inmate friends that I know of um, that keep up with me. But I had gotten letters before that said, "Thank you. This changed my life. I'm doing this now." I got some of those good letters that came back eventually over the years, but very, very few of those. Um, but it's just a different world.
So now I know we mentioned God joking about the guy that said he's God. But are you a man of faith? Did that come into play at any time, just as far as having to deal with what you were seeing?
I am deacon at the First Baptist Church in Huntsville, or was. Now we're living someplace else now, but yeah, I've always been a man of faith. I was raised as a Christian, and I think I bring my Christian values with it. And I tell people straight up in my groups or whatever that this is what I believe in, and I'm not going to force anybody. And I've been able to lead people to Christ. A death row guy that accepted Christ
Wow.
before he went on. I won't tell anything about his story because it would be too obvious who I was talking about. But that's it's happened, and but I think part of my faith is what got me through it too, um, and my being non-judgmental of some things because we all have our sins.
Sure. My dad was a prosecutor, and I remember at one point he was talking about how, like, you had to continue to treat these people like humans because you might be the only Jesus they ever saw. And so, because of that, we had people that would call him after they had gone to prison, gotten out, and then reoffended, and they would ask my dad if he could defend them because he had shown them Christ. And of course, he had to explain to him how the system works. Like, no, I still have to prosecute you. But I feel like that to have that role in the life of somebody who is seeking for what is right and wrong is a pretty important thing, and that's something that you brought to the job. When you dealt with folks, we kind of touched on the evilness, the fact that it's there. How much of what you saw do you feel like was a struggle between good and evil?
Oh, it's every day. Um, there is a lot of problems still in prisons. I'm sure every prison is the same. Texas Department of Criminal Justice is no different than others. There's people that bring in drugs. K2 is real bad. I can't tell you how many times I walk the runs and smell that. Marijuana, of course. A lot of worse stuff too. And like I said, psych always had the best drugs, so they were always seeking out mental health. You want to be clean, have mental health issues, so they could get the drugs.
Sure.
That was always a struggle for me. Luckily, I work with some good psychiatrists. I didn't deliver the drugs. I don't give them the drugs. I don't make that decision, but I do make the decision about what the diagnosis was. And the psychiatrist would work with me very closely as far as whether to continue the medications or not continue medications. And it was interesting, but um, the there's a lot of drugs in the prisons. There's everything you can think of there that there is out in the world too. So it's constantly there, but there are good people in prisons that have made mistakes, like you say.
Sure.
But like I said, mine was not to go in there and judge. My job was to keep them alive, keep them healthy, uh, and try to change their lives if I could. Um, that was the latter part that really wasn't in my job description, but
Mhm.
that's what came with getting themselves better or more steady. I mean, I would talk with some of them that were truly mentally ill. We kept up with their families. I knew the name of their dogs, their grandmothers, because they would call and check on their children, and we would, as a mother would sometimes, and if we had the release to talk to them about them, we would. Uh, so we tried to keep families together as much as we could too. With people who work with me, I usually had one or two social workers working with me that would do a lot of that talking stuff. But we tried to work as a team, and like I said, the whole thing is a team. Whether it's the warden on down to the newest recruit, we were all trying to one purpose and maintain order and civility, and trying to keep them killing each other.
And that's probably a really tough job. You mentioned when you were explaining all the different positions that you've had, all of the different experience that you have, you talked about, if I'm not mistaken, it was some type of a group or something that you started involving the sex offenders. Can you tell us more about that and kind of what that would have entailed?
A job I probably would not take again. The state of Texas went through a process of trying to determine the danger level, I guess you'd say, of reoffending sex offenders. Uh, I worked for the sex offender treatment program. I was the evaluation specialist. Basically, we'd bring people in and give them IQ tests and different types of tests to determine their different levels. There are several risk assessments that are available that I was trained in. We'd had several trainings from these nationally recognized risk assessment tools that were used to determine the efficacy of determining a person's chances of reoffending. They were all aimed at, uh, they were looking to civilly commit these people because their sentences were X number of years. And no matter what happens beyond that, the state of Texas said you got to let them go on the streets. And the emphasis was trying to put them in a situation where they would be civilly committed to an institution the rest of their lives. Um, I don't know how that ended up. I was actually in the first couple of trials that they had on guys that they were trying to civilly commit. I was one of the witnesses for the state um, as far as the risk assessments. Um, that's a job you really don't want because of the questions you have to ask. I know that a true sexual predator will tell you that he's abusing one child, thinking about how he's going to get the next one. It's an addiction, and it's pretty hard to listen to.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And I'm curious to know, I know that, I can I say a word, a medical word?
Yes. Okay.
All
Yeah.
right. So I know that pedophilia is an actual, like, medical, like, diagnoses. Um, but is that something that y'all were aiming to do, was to diagnose, like, as an illness or disorder, or what?
No, no, I never dealt when I was regular unit mental health professional. Now with the SOTP, that was the focus. They had groups there. They ran groups with the sex offenders. I wasn't involved in that. My job was more of the evaluation end of it as far as risk assessments. That was what my team did. Um, Pedophilia is a mental disorder. Of course, I don't want to get into today's population and what we believe today, but uh, you'd really get some calls back, and I don't want to go there. But I'm old school. Let's just say that there are mental issues I think that we're not addressing nowadays that we should, um, and I'll just leave it there. But no, I was not trying to cure. Basically, in regular units, I did not address sexual issues. Period. That was not my role. I was I guess you'd say restricted from doing that, which I didn't want to do it anyway.
When you look at the most violent of the criminals that you dealt with, whether it was the murderers, the serial rapists, things like that, was there anything that, like, if you could pin down one characteristic that they all had, was there one?
Lack of humanity. Um, the worst that I can think of. Um, like I said, the lights on, but nobody's home. There's just no. I don't know if it's no soul. That's up to God, not me. But there's no remorse for the crimes. Uh, that to me, I think was an issue that I had troubles with. Um, and that's both men and women. Like I said, I dealt with uh, women in SEG also. You think people who don't get along well with others, and even in prisons, the ones that don't get along well in prisons, that's this administrative segregation bunch. And there were women that were pretty violent themselves. Um, it's interesting. Um,
And I feel like there's a fascination with violent women like that. There have been, plenty of serial killer movies, but one that sticks out, of course, is the one about Aileen Wuornos monster. People are curious about what it is that can make a woman, us usually not being that kind of violent. I mean, I'm sure we have our days, but not like that usually. What was that like dealing with that side? And I realize it's probably not that much different, but our minds work so much differently. Was it different to deal with the female prisoners?
I will say I did not do therapy with the women prisoners.
Mhm.
That was done specifically by the people who own those units. Um, my job was to look at them and assess their current status and see if they had no mental issues that were not being addressed through conversations with them. I, I have been told by the women therapists that work on those units that they tend to be a little bit more drug seeking, a little bit more emotional, I guess you'd say,
Sure.
and they're usually more suicidal gestures, um, different from men. Men usually they cut or hang if they're successful. Um, the women usually is OD or something like that. That's not going to disfigure the body. But so I really don't have a reference to tell you as far as therapy with the women. Um, there were some that were scary.
I believe that there.
I'm not a small guy, but there were some scary women. But most of them were nice to me. Um, most of the inmates were nice to me. We'd talk about Hispanic gangs. You talk about I would go talk to on a daily basis or weekly basis or whatever, and you think they're pretty violent in their respect. All the major gangs were there, but you get to talking about Freddie Fender or something that they know and bring them out, and you just talk about something that might bring them around and just talk to you. Um, it's just you just kind of try to find something natural that you can talk to them about that is not threatening or insightful, or you don't walk up to them and ask them, "Are you crazy?" you
Right.
know, uh, you just shoot stuff, and I'd check out their cells. I'd check out how they were living. Yes, some of them were covered in feces. Some of them would be, just really sick. A lot of the psych medications would have side effects that I'd look for, like tardive dyskinesia, where their hands or their feet or their tongues move. I'd look for side effects like that to make sure they were having reactions to the medications. But basically, just look around, and if I have a question about somebody, I'd ask a couple cells down, what do you think about so and so over in the next cell over there? And he goes, "Oh man, he's crazy," you know. And they'll tell you, I mean, they don't want the crazy ones on their block because they holler all night and things like that. They worry about them too, but it's just you just talk to them like a normal person, like I'm talking to you, and just ask them, "How can I help you?"
Yeah, you're just building rapport.
Yeah.
So because your job entails you seeing if there are any mental illnesses that are either currently being treated or that haven't been treated yet. And did you ever make any type of connection between a certain diagnosis and a certain type of crime? Like, did you ever notice any types of connections?
Well, not really, because like I said, I didn't really emphasize on the crime part.
Mhm.
Um, a sociopath's a sociopath. There's certain tendencies they have that they don't care how they hurt other people or what they do to other people, and you can even see that in their families and how they describe their families um, and how they get along with each other. There were people that would have nothing to do with me, wouldn't want to talk to me, wouldn't want to discuss anything with me, and that's fine. I just walk on. I just like I said, I'm assessing as I'm looking anyway. Uh, and all I have to do is open myself up to it. I don't have to force anybody to say you're crazy. Uh, I was just looking for the clues, and I thought I was very good at it. And yeah, I would find one, probably 8 or 10 a year that were having issues, and bring it to the attention of the local mental health people on that unit, and they would address it from there. Um, I had a good reputation around the state, so nobody really doubted what I did. Uh, I think I was respected.
When you think back on it, well, let me ask this first. So you brought up gangs, and of course, gangs are something that I've studied and written about through the years many times. How many of the I mean, I realize once you get to prison, most people are gonna affiliate. But how many of these people do you feel like had kind of gone the way they did because of their affiliation, because they grew up in a gang type environment?
Yeah, a lot of them. Like I said, mostly it's drugs. Drugs association with the people is, um, the lifestyle that comes with that is usually associated with gangs.
Mhm.
Buying, selling, using, whatever. Um, I'd have people on death row tell me, "Yeah, if you let me out, I'd be stoned within 3 days and be back here in 5." It's just the power that some of them had, of the effects of the drugs on them. The drugs in prison, of course, it's not uncommon. I'm sure it's other prisons as well that guards get caught monthly basis bringing drugs in or something they shouldn't. There's a lot of money. You get a guy that's got a job for first job he's ever had, working making 30,000 a year, and somebody offers him $10,000 to bring a package in. Uh, they're young kids and they make mistakes.
Sure.
So that's always a danger, because then you've got the people on K2 and other things that are having problems. I've seen before that have been very dangerously currently abusing, to where they may have had uh, physical issues and needed to be taken to the infirmary quickly
Mhm.
because of things like K2 and stuff like that. I've picked up on some of those things as well, um, in my rounds and doings. Um, but it's just, I think overall drugs are probably the biggest influence on people in prison. Uh, Myself.
Sure.
Then with that goes the gangs that are selling the drugs and bringing them in over the borders and creating them in their backyards.
Absolutely. Well, and when you think about your time doing this, um, and I realize you can't tell us stories about specific people, but were there times that you were afraid for your life? Were you in situations where you had somebody come in and maybe they were under the influence of something or even just under the influence of their mental health issue that you were afraid that something was gonna happen to you?
Yeah, yeah. Usually when I tell them no,
Yeah,
uh, congratulations, you're not mentally ill. You have this and this issue, and you can work with me this way or that way, and we'll see if we can't resolve your issue. And a lot of them would threaten me, well, my sister said I am, and, she works the mental health out in the world, and we're going to get my lawyer on you, and we're going to do this and that. And uh, they're going to, I've been threatened all kinds of different ways in, in many things, physically. Uh, you got to consider, I walked in front of every administrative segregation inmate in the state of Texas twice a year, stood 3 feet in front of them through bars. I could have been stabbed. They make spears, they make bows and arrows, they throw stuff on people. The worst happened to me. I got spit at twice. I think part of that is because I am non-judgmental in a lot of things I do, and I don't try to force myself on people
Sure.
in doing what I was doing. But yeah, I was. There were some times that inmates would pop a lock, get out that shouldn't be out, running the wings. You don't carry any weapons on you. I didn't even have mace on me. When I'm doing my rounds, I would sometimes be escorted by a guard, sometimes not. When I would make my rounds, so I was, I guess you'd say, vulnerable. But I, like I said, I think the maddest they've been is when they've been in the cells. But the maddest they've been in my office too. And then when you talk about people, let's say I had a guy that he was basically a hitman for the Crips. Big, strong black guy, as wide as he was tall. And I worked him through about a year and a half of therapy. But at certain times, he would break down and slam on my table and yell at me and say, I don't want to go there. I don't want to change this. I want to do that. And I'd have guards come running in the room. I said, no, everything's okay. We're getting issues worked out here. And yeah, I could have been hurt. Uh, I'm not a small guy anyway, but I would have given my own back. But you know, there were times, yes, that I've been fearful of what I did. I'd be stupid not to. Same thing as an officer on the street. At least I know who the bad guys are. You're talking about your officer sitting there with you. She doesn't.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. I do think that your the way that you approach things definitely showing them respect because they are people. I think that absolutely plays a huge role in the way that they treat you. I relate as a female. I am small and I don't want people to escalate. So I do have a certain air about me when I am dealing with people because I want them to know that I respect them, I'm on their level, I'm not gonna treat them any different, and I think that resonates with them.
Mhm.
But I had a question. So, oftentimes we get to see those, like, driver's license photo transitions from when someone wasn't on drugs all the way to the last time that they were on drugs or maybe their, booking photos rather. And so I'm curious to know if because you came in contact with every inmate twice a year. Did you ever get to deal with someone repeatedly where you could see maybe their mental health getting worse because it was untreated or it was misdiagnosed or just as they continued to live their life in captivity, essentially?
Yeah. Prison's not for the weak. It's not a pleasant place to be. I mean, you have most of it has no air conditioning. Um, I'd be dressed like I am walking the runs when it's 105 degrees outside, and the fans they run in the prisons really don't help much. I'd
Mhm.
be soaking sweat, but yeah, of course, I was in junior high before I ever had an air conditioner in one of my schools, but so I grew up with that. I couldn't do that now. but yeah, I've seen people age over the years in prisons uh, through either their not so much the side effects of the mental health medications they were taking. Usually they would get more stable and more calm uh, behind those medications if it was truly a mental illness problem that they were dealing with. But you have enough grief in your life and you add something to it, uh, like losing a grandmother or mother. A lot of them, the grandmother was the key figure in their household or something like that. Um, and the effects of that grief over a period of time, losing a child, they lose children through gang violence in the streets back in the world, and they can't help them. They can't do anything for them, or they know their kids are getting involved in drugs or getting involved in gangs or something back in the streets, and they can't do anything about it. That wears on people too. There were some inmates that had been in there for a long time. Some of the people on death row I had known a long time because actually back when I worked on Ellis as a counsel substitute, death row was there. They hadn't escaped there at that time, and so they moved death row to the Polunsky unit, and eventually I was the head mental health over Polunsky unit for about 4 years, and so I knew them from Ellis 4 years, 5 years, 6 years later on Polunsky. You knew them 5 or 6 years there, and then when I did other units, then came back as the mental health evaluator or monitor. I would see the same inmates again that I'd known for 20 years. So yeah, I can see a lot of changes in those things too. Um, yeah, prison wears down on them. It takes its toll.
So
Of
now,
course,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying I used to be good looking too.
Time gets us all.
It does. It does.
So, when you look back, are there particular inmates that you still think of? Are there, did you have favorites, people that
Oh
that
yeah.
hang with you?
Oh yeah. 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 There were quite a few people that uh, I would say you call it a good inmate. That were without the influence of drugs, without the influence of the threats on the street or their families or whatever it was that got them into prison. I met some old Vietnam War guys that had PTSD and got into drugs, and that's how they ended up in prison. You got them off the drugs and got them in a stable relationship or a stable environment, and they were just perfectly fine individuals and great people to talk to. Like I said, I don't keep up with anybody anymore. That's not something I really want to promote. Um, if anybody your fans are out there listening and you happen to be one of them, but don't write me. Uh, I'm perfectly fine knowing that you're okay. uh, that's it's it's a world you see people get old and you see them change, and yeah, there's a lot of people like that. I saw several people that would in or out 2 or 3 times in my tenure uh, for different things, but usually the same type things associated with going back in the same patterns they were in beforehand. If you tell somebody, buy you no car, drive to Colorado, uh, get you a cheap fishing pole and a $5 license, and you can catch trout on the side of a stream in Colorado and cook it on an open campfire and let's smell the pinyon wood at night and feel the cold air in the evenings. They've never experienced stuff like that. A lot of them haven't. And those are just such simple things that, I got to experience that they never did. So again, where am I to be judgmental on something? I had great parents. I had, you know, my father was deacon at the Baptist church. I was raised in a Christian atmosphere. My wife I married, and we've been married 50 years. She was raised in a Christian family. I guess that's my white privilege. Uh, is that it, but I tried to bring that to other people to let them know that that can be experienced if they choose to change that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it sounds simple. It's not. You know that you have to start buying an old used lawnmower and going house to house and trying to make enough money to feed your families. It starts. I dug ditches for a living when I was going through college. I paid my way through school. I worked at Right Care Poultry Products, taking the head and feet to chickens and cooking them off, making chicken feed out of them. I worked at Lone Star Feed, loading road trucks and railroad cars all night long. To pay my way through college. I was a guard for 2 years, 2 summers. You do what you got to do to make where you want to be, but a lot of them don't have that future. I guess they don't know that there's a future out there other than what they have been brought up in, and that's the
Yeah.
sad part.
When you got done, when you retired, was there a feeling in you like maybe you had just gotten out? Like, did you understand that feeling sort of?
Well, my kids had to stop saying my dad's in prison. Uh,
Never.
uh, it. I miss the therapy. I miss trying to help people in a positive way. Um, I don't miss the walking the runs in the 100-degree heat, driving for 13 hours to get to El Paso to see 25 people, and then having to turn around and drive back home. I don't miss the nights I had to spend in cheap hotels, state rate hotels. While my family and my kids were in school or doing things. Of course, most of that my kids were out of school and out of college before I ever started this last job. But my wife didn't always want to come with me because some of the places, spend the night at Palestine, Texas, or whatever is not an exciting thing to do. But
Sure.
she was still working some too. She was a diagnostician, so she worked on the little kids. I worked on the big ones.
Yeah. Well, so when you think back on all those years, what is the takeaway for all the time that you spent dealing with those folks?
I think I help people. I enrich myself. Um, I'm comfortable with what I did. I can say what I've done has made a difference in somebody's life. Um, I, I, I hope I brought that to my family and my kids, that of who I am and what I am, and can their father be respected? And I hope it's there. Um, I like I said, I miss the therapy because I enjoy the helping process. Uh, but then again, I like sleeping in late in the mornings now.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
you know, stayed up and watching the late show at night when I used to think, no, I can't watch this show tonight. I got to get up and go drive to Beaumont tomorrow. Whatever. Uh, but I miss that. I miss working with the people I worked with, the guards, the nurses, the doctors, the psychiatrists, um, you know, the people that were involved in maintaining the inmates as well as I. There are a lot of people that are carrying guards. There are a lot of people that are carrying nurses and doctors uh, that I've worked with, and we help to protect each other. Um, I miss those people. I miss camaraderie, uh, the BS that goes with it, and everything like that. But I feel I did good for people.
Good deal. Well, Amanda, you have any closing thoughts or questions? Anything to leave on?
I just think that it's such a special gift to be able to go into a place where your desire is to help people, even if they don't want your help. Because I'd imagine a lot of them probably resist just for the simple fact that they have trust issues,
Sure.
for lack of a better
Sure,
way to say it. I mean, the only other people that they deal with inmates, and then they deal with the guards who a lot of times are probably more strict than the inmates would like.
sure,
And so for them to get to have an interaction with anyone who isn't in charge of telling them what to do is probably just such a relief to them and an escape. And so I feel like in a way you provided them with an escape for even just the few minutes that you got to spend with them. And the fact that you've gotten a couple of letters that people are
Mhm.
like, thank you, you helped me, definitely proves that like you made an impact. I think that's awesome.
Well, it's the same thing you're doing as a police person out there. You're approaching people and trying to find how you can help them. That's your job, and to protect people. And you're not going to get thank you from everybody. I've got a lot of police
Yeah.
friends, uh, and I respect them very much for what they do. Matter of fact, they in Huntsville they wanted me to become a police officer at one time. The police chief, you need to come sign. No, 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 no. I'm going this way. Sorry. So
Well, and so, Bo, anything that you would want to add that we wouldn't know to ask you before we go?
no, no. Y'all have a good show. Hope you enjoy it. Hope I didn't bore anybody, any of your fans.
Definitely not. We appreciate your being here with us, especially taking the time tonight. Of course, for those of you that don't know, our Daniel Anderson, who is our podcast producer, he does Audio Alchemy. He's incredible. If you need a podcast, that's the guy. Well, Bo is his uncle, so that's how we were able to orchestrate having him all the way from Texas tonight. And we're really grateful for that. If you want to sponsor Investigation Homicide, just hit us up in one of our social medias, or you can yeah, that's going to be the best way now that I'm saying that.
Yeah.
But also be sure and tune in every week, 5 p.m., Investigation Homicide right here on Facebook, or you can find us on any of the podcast downloading places.
All the things.
All the things. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.